Hey, Silvia.
Hi,
Thanks
Eric.
for coming onto my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I
And
hear you're here to interview me.
say again.
I hear you're here to interview me.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you before we started recording. Like, it's very interesting this dynamic of who is interviewing and who is being interviewed because you're having this podcast, but it's just like a reverse podcast. So you're being interviewed by different people. And I even noticed myself, like when we started. Well, first of all, this is my first time interviewing anyone. But also, I noticed, like, so do I start? Do you start? It's like it's your podcast, but I'm interviewing you. So it's fun to play around with that.
Hmm. Yeah, I figured I would just start it and then hand it off.
Hmm, sounds great. Let's do that. Um, so I asked you this question before we started, but I'm gonna ask it again because I feel like
Hmm.
it's really nice to just land in the space while everybody's listening already. How are you feeling right now?
Well, I noticed I have a giant smile on my face that wasn't there a bit ago. And it's probably due to some amount of nervousness of something. Um, but it's also like, excitement. Like, oh, we're doing a thing. We're doing the podcast. Great question as well. How are you doing?
Um, Also noticing the same thing. A part of it because it was already there, and part of it because you mentioned it, so it became more obvious. Oh wow, actually, I'm also smiling a lot, and I think it's also because of a little bit of nervousness. Um, feeling feeling playful. Yeah, a little bit nervous, a little bit playful. It's an interesting mix. Mm, I'm curious about what is. Do you notice any difference so far between how you are arriving to this interview and the first one you had with Tashin?
Yeah, he has interviewed people before, and that was part of the reason to get set up with him. And he was, in some sense, hosting the whole thing, even though it was my podcast. Um, and I feel like I have more responsibility to set things up this time than I had last time. But still, I'm somehow figuring out how to hand off the role a little bit.
Mm, that makes sense. Yeah, it was interesting. Also, like to notice the the pre conversations we had before the podcast because you immediately said, "Oh, I will send you a link," and I was like, "Huh," but I was supposed to be interviewing you, and I was surprised. And also, it seems like you naturally shifted into that position of, "Okay, I'm gonna take the host role, and I'm gonna hold the space for this to happen." And I like that. I like this kind of
Well, one thing you
interchangeable
might
roles.
learn
Hmm.
One thing you might learn about me is I'm a bit of a quality snob as well. So I was like, I want it, super high quality, uh, both for video and audio and everything. And so that was one thing I can very easily take responsibility for,
Hmm.
cause that to happen.
Sounds great. Um, is that something that you can relate to in other areas of your life, like being a quality snob, or is it just in terms of technical details, like when you record an interview?
Um, hmm. I mean, it basically just depends on my skill in the area. Like when it comes to dancing, and technical terminology around dancing, even I prefer to be quite precise if I can be. Um, that's a certain kind of quality. And then, yeah, anything technical with um, video and audio stuff. I have my old computer set up. I have my nice microphone and everything. It shows up in a lot of places.
Hmm. Yeah, I can
What's your
tell.
experience of a quality?
Hmm. My experience of quality. That's a big question. Hmm. Can you ask me something more specific?
Yeah, how do you relate to like high quality video and audio for an easy example?
Hmm. I think it makes a difference definitely in the way how I engage with the content. I've never really thought about that too much. Like, I never paid too much attention to see how, okay, let's see what kind of videos I watch and if the ones that are filmed with better quality equipment actually make me feel more interested or engaged or create a different experience overall. I think they do, but on the other hand, I can see why it would be like, for me personally, when I was making YouTube videos a while ago, a few years ago, I very easily got lost in this trap of trying to edit things a lot and make it perfect. And then it just took a long time to put it out there. And then I just got discouraged and I was producing uh, very, like, much less than I wanted and getting discouraged instead of just putting things out there. And if I would do it again, I would just prioritize quantity over quality, at least while I started.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm. Yeah, so that obviously relates to the podcast in a certain way. Like, for me, I know how to uh, like there's certain things I can do on autopilot in terms of quality. Like I knew how to set up using Zencaster. I know how to set that up. I know how to like edit basically in Premiere, and uh, yeah, the philosophy here with this podcast is just like it's some amount of quantity. You know, as many interviews as I can be doing, basically, um, with some like minimal editing. If I notice that I'm like less likely to actually publish the thing, because I like want to get something right and be perfectionist, then I'm like, okay, no, I can't get that to be perfect. I'm just not gonna worry about that. I just like focus on publishing. That's where I'm currently at with this.
Hmm.
Um,
I like that intention.
I'll, I also have another reflection about quality. One of the main ways I noticed quality showing up in other areas of my life has to do with the speaker system at a dance event of some kind. Changes a lot about like how I experience the music and how well I dance. Um, and it's something that's like quite subtle. Like one of them is even just like how much bass is there uh, at a dance event. Like these smaller local events they don't have as good a speaker system, and it's like hard to get into dancing the same way.
Yeah, I would guess that it would affect you differently depending on the kind of material content that you are consuming. Like, for example, I think if it's a podcast, it matters to a certain extent, but because what I'm trying to get out of it is intellectual content more than. Although I don't know, I also like to feel close to the person that is speaking, and it does make a difference, but I would guess that it makes more of a difference when it comes to something that is so felt, like music. Um, so yeah, I would imagine there would be a difference. Well, while you were talking about that, about your intention for this podcast being to just record as many interviews as possible and not really obsess about quality. Uh, I was curious about what other intentions do you have for it, because I remember that in your last interview you were
Mm.
mentioning that you want to just have conversations with people while you remain in first person perspective. So that's something else. Are there any other intentions that either came up since then or that you already had in mind for this project that you're doing with the podcast?
Hmm. Well, one thing that's coming up that's I find interesting is you have in fact like listened to the last podcast, and I'm
I
wondering
have.
how much of a trend that's going to be with like people coming on the podcast having listened to the previous ones or not. Um, part of part of the intention is just to be like more well known among people, especially people on Twitter. Um, and like have an interface for that. Whereas like I don't show up naturally on Twitter as much. I have like tweeted a lot since that last interview, much more than I normally do, which is, you know, part of the learning process. Um, but yeah, the other intention is to just have conversations basically with people. There's a certain extent to which just an excuse to talk to people, and like the podcast is sort of an aside in another way. So those are the like main intentions, and this is part of a project with Malcolm to like have me get more seen in the world
Hmm.
this way.
How do you want to be seen, or what are some ways in which you want to be seen in the world?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up is like how can I almost reverse the question, which I'm like not doing right now. I notice, but there's a certain way that I can do that that uh, I find very interesting. Malcolm finds very interesting. How do I want to be seen? Hmm. One thing I want to be seen for is something like patience or ability to wait and not rush things.
I like that. Just
Which I can do by, you know, just not speaking, and it's
just leaving the silence lingering.
hmm
Hmm. Hmm.
that's one way to do it. Part of that is more present after. Well, maybe I'll leave. I actually won't mention that, but it's just I was listening to another Tashin podcast, and I might have the same guest. I will not say who yet.
Okay. Hmm.
But I got it in that podcast. I got more present to like ways I had been rushing or something in the last podcast.
Do you feel like um, allowing for silence in conversation um, helps you be seen in that way?
Yeah, there's a certain energy you can get into if you're always trying to fill the space that um, is not the pace I actually think at. And so basically, then this conversation is always happening slightly faster than the speed at which I can think at and process things. And my sense is it's like this with most people. Um, but some people also just have an ability to fill space with all sorts of words or take up the space with words like sort of while they're thinking about something in the background, and then they can just blah 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 and then be like anyway, and then say like what some other thing that they were processing in the background. I not my style.
Mm. Well, it's not my style either, so I think there will be a lot of silences in this conversation.
Listeners, you have been warned.
Actually, this is something I've been talking about with several people recently because I'm
Mm.
noticing that I am stopping to think more about what I'm saying when I'm talking to people, and that creates more silences. And definitely with some people there's less silence because it's easy for them to take up that space, but then with some other people the silence just just shows up more often. So what I've been doing is just bringing the conversation to be about that and asking them how they feel about silence in conversations. And then once we talk about that and once it becomes acknowledged, it just gains a different flavor. And I feel like this is what is happening right now. Like we're turning to the relational level of this interaction. And this is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm happy we're going there.
Ah, 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 ah. Very good. I mean, the silences can easily go a different way, and where people get like a little neurotic about when to say something, whether they have something good enough to say, something like that. I don't feel that currently.
Okay. But you do sometimes?
I mean, it depends how big the group is. Depends on the rhythm. Depends how easy it is to say something. Like normally it happens at the beginning of some group interaction, usually.
Mm. Something else I wanted to ask you was about you wanting to use this podcast as a way to introduce yourself and
Mm-hmm.
having as an audience the people on Twitter. So, have you made any discoveries so far in this process of introducing yourself and kind of finding, yeah, how you communicate who you are to others?
What I'm hoping for is someone messages me, or somehow I'm able to see the like effects of the podcast out there. I have not seen quite a concrete thing yet, other than like interacting with Tashin a whole lot more. That's one very obvious thing. And like maybe I'll just have to talk to everybody, and then everybody will know me, and that seems fine actually. Um, thus far, haven't seen too much about how I talk. I was somewhat surprised how much I could talk last time. I think this says something about Tashin's skill as an interviewer, but also like what happens if I actually get space to talk. Because the whole frame was like Eric is going to talk, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird. I don't normally do that." So part of this is also like, what is my skill at being interviewed?
Hmm.
Interviewed.
Um, I get what you mean, and I like your answer, but I think I was looking for something a little bit
Hmm.
different. Um, Not so much as in what is it that you got externally from having put this podcast episode out there, but more as in what is your experience of introducing yourself and
Hmm.
what has that process looked like, and have you made any discoveries maybe more on an internal level since then?
Hmm. I did notice as I was answering the question, I felt this like I could go down two routes.
Mm-hmm.
I could go down like what's active in my head. Like you say some words that resemble a question, and I'm like, what does that produce in me? And then there's another part of my head that like wants to go like answer the very specific question, answer that. And I decided to go down that just like what was active. Um,
Perfect.
and yeah, and then it was like, and it like didn't actually answer your thing, which is interesting. Which is great. And then you clarified the thing, and here we are. So,
Yeah, I mean, you answered it, and as I said, I really liked your answer. And now I'm just like, oh, but I'm still curious about this other thing. So can you give me another answer?
what is my internal experience? Like, what have I gained internally from doing the podcast, from doing the
Mm-hmm.
last one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's generally a hard question for me. Not the first one that I like want to actually answer. Um, Part of it has been like putting myself out there in a certain way that I haven't in a long time. The last ways I've like a feeling that I can put myself out there again. I've previously put myself out there in other ways with uh, dancing and photography and stuff, but I like stopped at some point. I felt like, why am I doing this? Why, like, what do people see whenever I post photos or whatever? Um, it feels like something I can do, momentum, something's building up. It still doesn't feel like an answer to your question. Maybe
I like
I
the
noticed.
process of you finding the answer. If you don't mind that, I'm enjoying
what,
it.
what what would be an internal thing? Um, what's an example of an internal thing that I like might have gotten?
Um, an example of an internal thing. For example, finding um, a new process of noticing a new process of creating an identity for yourself, or hmm, not necessarily an identity. Actually, I don't like that very much. Um, because you mentioned that you want to introduce yourself to the world. So this is something external, but there's a process through which you go, like an introspective process, I imagine, to discover how to give out the vibe that you want to people. So I think I was thinking more about that. Like, is there a new process that you have discovered, or like a new insight about who you are and how you want to communicate that to the world, or a new aesthetic you're feeling into? And for example, not necessarily just with a podcast even, but I know you've been posting on Twitter, and uh, just doing that as a regular exercise, at least for me, helps me realize that I like to use certain words to describe myself, or the things I do, or my intentions, or what is the impact I want to create on people that I am trying to reach out to. I don't know if this answers your question.
It's a hell of an answer. Um, what words, what impression, what identity? It's interesting. Hmm. I mean, what I noticed last podcast is I didn't actually do as much of some kind of meta or reversal thing as I would normally like to be doing. Actually, um, we'll see if that shows up here as much as I would like.
What do you mean by meta reversal thing?
Right. So I could talk about it, or I could, somehow embody it at some
Mm-hmm.
point. Um, I mean, I guess playing with the podcast frame and that like I'm the one being interviewed on my own podcast is like one very simple setup of the whole situation. Um, who else does that? I don't know anyone else who does that. Um,
Me neither.
but it's hard to come up with an example because I always want to do it live and I'm like I can't figure out how to do it right now. So it's like here we are. but that's going to be the thing in the back of my mind to figure out how to do.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
I have a question though.
Okay.
What is your experience of me um, listening to me on the podcast versus like interviewing me now? What's the difference there, if there is any?
Hmm. Well, I think there's two different ways in which I could describe it, or two different dimensions of my experience. One is how I see you, and the other one is how I see the whole conversation because I'm a part of it now.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I think my impression of you is different. I'm not exactly sure how, because I didn't think about it until you asked me this question. So I'm still trying to put it in words. Let me try to answer that one
Okay.
first. Mm,
You can take your time.
thank you. Let's be silent for a moment. It seems to me that you are taking more time. So, like on an objective level, like it seems to me like you're taking more time to answer questions or to think before questions. I'm not sure if you have the same perception about yourself. Do you?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so it's intentional.
So I guess it's working.
Yeah, of course, you mentioned it before. Mm, other than that, I think some mannerisms seem different. I'm not sure though, because I watched part of it and then the rest of it I listened to while I was walking.
Mm.
So I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, just some facial expressions are different, but I'm not sure exactly how. Um, and I think the fact that you are trying to not rush into answering things and taking more space and allowing for there to be more silence also impacts how I am here today. Not just the difference I see in you between this interview and the previous one, but also uh, that I am now a part of this conversation, and I am also part of this silence, and this brings up a little bit of, I don't know, I think discomfort because it's being recorded and I am aware of that, and then I'm extremely aware of everything that I'm saying, and also paying more attention to the things you are saying because um, I am expected to be part of this conversation. So yeah, from my experience, there are definitely less moments of being distracted or mind wandering. I would say there are barely any, and in the previous one, there were, because I was just, it was triggering different thoughts for me, and then I was doing something else and I was going here and I was getting into the car, and yeah, so those are some of the ways in which it's different for me.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You also bring up the like way the medium affects the whole situation. Like if you're not just like is it interactive or not, but can you pause it? Can you experience the podcast in a different way?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And an interesting experience that I'm having as my first time interviewing someone, well, it feels like we're having more of a conversation than me just interviewing you, is that I'm noticing that I'm usually not aware at all, listening to podcasts, that people are actually doing this live, and that for them this was an experience that they did and it happened in real time, and they were actually having the power of changing whatever they're going to say next. So this is also interesting to be experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can relate to that at all.
That is another goal of the podcast in another way, is to like get people on the podcast who maybe haven't done podcasts before.
Mm-hmm.
It's so my friends have this practice of recording like most of our conversations, and this has been very, it's been very interesting to be able to go back to other conversations and like re-listen to them and be like, how are we showing up in this conversation, and then have a conversation about that, or being able to share conversations that I had with someone, with someone who was there, and have them actually experience what it was like to be in that conversation. And podcasts are sort of obviously kind of like that, except that there's a slightly different audience in mind, in that like this is going on the internet as opposed to just being shared with friends. At the same time, there's like, who do I expect to actually listen or watch to this? And it's like, well, probably only anyone who's actually interested in like who Eric is, who Silvia is, because there's really not a lot else. I mean, I could put a topic on the thing, but I guess that's part of the goal of the podcast, or not like an anti-goal, is like more being about like not having to have an interesting topic that people talk about. I'm very tired of interesting conversations. Um, which is a whole like tag for me. It's like basically it doesn't matter who's talking in that case. It matters more. Can you like say the smartest possible thing about this topic? And I don't know. I'm tired of it. I've had too many conversations like that.
So what do you
Here we are.
want? So you don't want that. What do you
I
want
don't want
instead?
that. I want more personal involvement. I want it. This is why, like, the topic, at least on the first one, was just the first interview.
Mm.
Like I put in the description a bit more about like what we actually talked about, but it's kind of beside the point. It's all like in relation to who's on the podcast.
Mm. So what are some of the how do I ask this question? I don't remember exactly how you phrase it. Like you want it to be more personal, personal involvement. You want it to have personal involvement. So what could that look like? What does that look like for you?
Um, I guess one way I'm conceiving of it is like it's a podcast that I want my friends to listen to more so than like I want the world to listen to. And friends, or like would be friends. People who like maybe aren't my friend yet, but like they probably will be, you know. If
So
people around the world want to listen to it, fine, sure. It's not as relevant in that way, I think.
so it's a personal involvement with the listener that you mean, not with the
Yeah.
interviewer.
Both.
Both. So
I mean, the listener might become the interviewer.
true. Yeah. Is that happening already?
Oh, I think so. You've
Cool.
listened to it, now you're interviewing.
Yeah, true. Hmm. You mentioned that you are tired of big topics, and I don't know. Like in your previous interview, you talked about some topics, and you still feel like there was
Totally
personal
did.
involvement.
Totally did.
So what are
Well,
what are some topics that would feel like personal involvement, or how would you phrase personal involvement as topics, if you could?
yeah, the last one I talked a bit more about yeah, big topics. It's not like big topics are banned. It's more like, what is my relation to the topics? What is the interviewer's relation to the topic? Um Are they learning something about me or you in the process of the conversation versus are they just having thoughts of if they have thoughts of their own that's about how they're relating to what we're talking about as well, that's like also fine. Just that I don't want it to be completely divorced from, who I am in a way that I have had conversations before. That makes sense.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that you want the listener to have a connection of some sort with you and me, and also have thoughts about whatever topics we're talking about, but not have that be completely disconnected from the conversation we are having and from themselves as someone who is hearing that and having their own thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think right now we're getting appropriately loopy about the whole thing as well. Like I can only imagine what someone listening to this is like, what thoughts am I having about this podcast? And now here I am asking this question. I don't know. It'll be listeners, tell me what thoughts you're having. Post a comment on wherever the thing is that you see this. That will be very interesting.
This is an episode about the podcast.
I mean, that was what the original one was, but I never published it because it was a little too loopy, honestly.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe that's where we're going. We can shift
That's
direction.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been appropriately object level enough such that if it gets a little loopy, that's fine, I think.
Okay. Perfect.
The other one was just loopy, and it was like, this is very silly.
Hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you about something that I feel curious about,
Please.
and that you also mentioned in your first interview, but I don't think it requires people to have listened to it. It's
Mm-hmm.
about the ways in which you think. And you mentioned that usually thinking starts with motion for you, and that was after you were talking about dancing and the importance of having net. I think it was also the importance of having networks where you like based on intellectual activity, not just physical activity. And I was curious about what you meant by that, like thinking starting with motion.
Part of that is like I don't think in words.
Okay.
It's yeah, I'm pretty sure I would have mentioned something like proprioceptive thinking of some kind. Um, like when I think about concepts, I think more about like their physical relation, not exactly physical, but like abstractly physical relation or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is kind of like geometry or something like that. Except I feel like I want to, manipulate it somehow with not quite my hands, but like my spiritual hands in some sense.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know that kind of movement is that's the kind of movement I mean when it starts with movement. Um, it's one of those things where like if you can involve more senses in thinking in however you're doing something, I think you like think about it better, or learn about stuff better. Um, you could also, that could definitely become a good-hearted thing where good-hearting refers to Goodhart's law, which is if you the more popular a measure becomes, the more useless it becomes as a measure. Not quite the exact wording, but like that. You could definitely like try and involve all the senses and like totally just like miss the point on like what you're actually trying to think about as well. So might have to be careful about that. But generally, if something is able to be interacted with in a lot of different ways, you can get a lot of perspectives on it. You can see what the like different dimensions are to something. So
Can you give me an example of how you do that in your life?
hmm. I guess the main way I would do this is by relating to how do I relate, the non-naive trust dance that I mentioned last thing and my actual dancing. Now there's like dance in both of the names. Um, but like there's as an activity, they're like they're on different levels of abstraction and they're quite actually different. So when I'm like, I like basically whenever I'm comparing things, I'll be like, okay, so non-naive trust dance, West Coast swing. Like this is just that's always how it starts with like, I got these two things. How do I put them together? What's this thing between them? And like then I'll like trace out the philosophy that seems similar to me. But yeah, I don't know. This whole like having things in your hands is inspired by one of my friends who gave a presentation about holding two things at once. Like, can you hold these two things that seem incompatible? And that like really stuck with me. Yeah, this example of like being in a classroom and or not a classroom, like there was a kid who wanted to play a game and he wanted like to finish the level. He really badly wanted to finish the level and he had to go to the bathroom. He had these two different things and he's trying to figure out, how can I put these together into a preference ordering? And it's like now it's one thing. And now you can like work with that a little better. And like, okay, I got this preference ordering of like I want to finish this game before I go to the bathroom. But you got to have that before in there. This is an example of complexifying one's ontology.
Mm. I really like that that analogy. Very useful.
What do you like about it?
Um, I like that I can feel it. Like I can imagine wanting to win a game, and I can imagine really wanting to go to the bathroom, and then I can imagine the how it feels to turn them into just one thing. And I want to finish this game before I go to the bathroom, and
Mm-hmm.
I can feel how it is for that to become one thing. Um, are you experiencing that in any way right now?
Mm-hmm. I do not have to go to the bathroom right now. That's what you're asking.
Say again.
um, I do not have to go to the bathroom right now.
Okay.
uh, I'm not really experiencing it right now. Mostly when I experience this, like in that example, it's like trying to make a decision of some kind, um, or trying to navigate some situation where, I mean, in that particular example, it's like, what's my preference ordering of these two different things? Um, there's also other moves where like somehow you can do both, and that's always a creative act when you have like two incompatible things you want. Can you somehow do something that like, can you find a third option that satisfies your uh, other preferences, like the base conditions of what you want, your needs? Are you experiencing anything like this right now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I'm holding any particularly incompatible experiences at the moment. Not experiencing any tension. No, I don't think so. Hmm. So we have gotten out of the loopy bit
Oh, for now.
for now, and now I'm bringing it back. This is something that brings me great pleasure to jump
Very good, very good.
back and forth. Um, and I wanted to have another check in with you to see how you're feeling
Mm.
right now, given the places where we've been so far in this conversation.
I've been experiencing like this like ripple sort of like if you know there's a I mean partly because I can see the interface where it shows whenever I talk it goes whoop 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 with a little waveform, um, but I've experienced like like sort of like nervous stress. Okay, just nervous stress. Okay, just nervous stress, and it like doesn't actually go all the way up. It's just like up, and I've been sort of experiencing it the whole time. Um, and I feel like generally it's gone down. Actually, I've gotten a little more relaxed.
Happy to
How
hear
about
that.
you?
I can relate to this wavy experience, not necessarily in terms of feeling relaxed and tense, but more in terms of uh, flow. It feels like we're playing catch in a way, and at first it was more oh, here's ball, oh, here's ball, oh wait, here it is, back at you, back at you. Okay, so what do we do with the ball now? Oh, now noticing that sometimes we drop the ball for a long time, here we are looking at the ball. And now it seems like um, the ball stays either in the air for longer, or that one of us holds the ball for longer and does stuff with the ball. Hmm. I'm also feeling more relaxed and feeling very aware of, yes, since you mentioned that uh, we seem to be going a little bit on the loopy side, I'm becoming very aware of when we go to the meta level, and I'm just noticing myself being careful to not do it too much, and then thinking
Mm.
about okay, do we talk about topics or do we talk about what's happening right now?
Do you have these two desires that you would like to figure out how to navigate?
Actually, I am feeling that way after all. Huh. Um, so I'm leaning towards finding a third option. Do you have any ideas?
Well, the move I often make is that the topic uh, is the meta somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like the way you've described meta is like I don't know, or even I've described it. It can be interpreted as like I don't know, overhead or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the conversations I have that do get loopy, like the loopiness is definitely a feature that I can't do that with everyone. I prefer being able to be, somewhat loopy about the thing. It's just, and there's also just like some sense of it wanting to go somewhere. So, like you need some kind of object level in order to ground everything. But as long as you have that, you can sort of, there's a whole skill in navigating how much meta to have and of what kind. Like one thing that is really annoying is if you just sort of go meta on meta on meta on meta, and like now we're talking about, and it's just like there's an art to skillful meta. So many of my conversations have tended to go that way. That is another thing I want to demonstrate on the podcast, actually, is having skillful meta conversations.
Hmm.
In that vein, I had a question. You described that in the conversation, at some point, the ball would get dropped. And I was like, oh, the ball would get dropped. And like that, how was that being experienced? Or what was being made of the ball being dropped?
So, being that this is a conversation and that, if someone is just listening to it, all the information that's available is voice, ball being dropped is silence. So, that's what I meant by it.
Well, that's a pretty straightforward answer.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm getting from that is it's okay to drop the ball. That was not a mistake.
Yeah, I
Or
definitely
if it was a
resonate with
mistake, I mean, how are mistakes thought of and held? When someone makes a mistake, is that bad?
that. Is it bad to drop the ball? How would you describe, like, if you would use the metaphor of playing catch to describe a conversation, what would dropping the ball look like for you? What would it mean? And would it be bad?
It's part of the whole feedback process or calibration process. Like if there wasn't enough silence of some kind, that's you have a different runaway problem. If you don't manage to have anything to say at all, that's the opposite sort of runaway problem. If you're just throwing, if you're always missing the ball when someone throws it to you, that's kind of not great. If I mean, you could have another problem of like having too many balls and like you're all trying to throw it and catch at the same time. It's like just a big mess. That would be another thing that could happen. The simplest metaphor is just like feedback for both the person throwing the ball and catching the ball, what they could be doing differently to like have the other person catch it and have it be caught, both on the throwing side and the catching side. And like this is the first time we're actually talking, so there's a whole calibration process there.
It seems like in your metaphor, dropping the ball, yeah, well, that is how you play catch, kind of. Dropping the ball means losing the game, so there is a
Bad.
quality of being bad to it. uh, I wasn't seeing it like that when, yeah, I just, silence is like the ball being dropped because the ball being in the air or in our hands is voice or speech. So I was just noticing that. What do you think is, so seeing conversation as play, seeing what we're doing as a game or playing together? Not sure exactly what question I want to ask. Let me think about it for a moment.
Make sure it's playful.
What does it mean to win the game then?
I mean, this is like infinite game stuff. It's like what game? I guess the way I think about it is like everything is sort of a mini game in the infinite game. And I mean, exactly the question, what does it mean to win, is like something you have to define for yourself, or with a group, such that you can like do something and get it done. For me, winning is something like having a good conversation and that can be defined a lot of different ways. Conversation where like people learn stuff about each other, or just in general, or just they felt good, they want to have another one, blah blah blah. Um, I guess another particular criteria for me is like a different conversation than some kind of usual. Something in the like, not just what was it about, but like how was the conversation had. I'm very glad to be able to have the amount of silence that we have had, and the kind of silence that we have had that might it's avoided. The silence is avoided in a lot of other contexts.
Yeah, and I'm also imagining it for people who are listening. I'm wondering how many people who started listening to this are still listening by now with all the silences, which is
I mean, according to
interesting.
YouTube, it's around 8% of people
Mm,
who ever clicked on it.
great. Thank you. If you're still listening, you're great. Um, I wanted to ask you something else that was connected to what you were just saying. Mm, I forgot what it was. But meanwhile, I'm curious about your
You
relationship
dropped the
with.
ball.
Dropped it. Meanwhile, I'm curious about your relationship with infinite games and um, what games are you playing in general in your life, whether infinite or finite?
I mean, I guess I see the infinite game as sort of like the biggest game. It's the whole thing. It's the giant game. Um, I mean, one kind of extremely straightforward version of an answer to that is like, what games have I been playing? Like computer games, board games. I've been playing a lot, and this is apparently something like people don't know about me. It's like I don't know. I'm a pretty good gamer. Malcolm was surprised about this anyway. Um, I won't. Oh, should be fine. Cool. Um, I mean, the podcast game is a game. I think the Twitter game is a game. Um, Tashin even had this metaphor of like what games people are playing on Twitter last time, and I haven't quite leaned as much into that metaphor, but that is, I sort of see a lot of things as games. It's very much okay. Like, what's the goal of this game, of this interaction? Similar to like kind of what I just said. Um, Part of playing a game with other people, though, is like having a common understanding of what winning is, or at least like what winning is to the other person and to yourself, such that you can both win. Hopefully, I don't like games where there is mutually exclusive goal attainment, also known as competition,
Hmm.
where people like only one person can win. I don't like that. Um, this definition of competition comes from Alfie Kohn's The Case Against Competition, which basically is the reason why I started. One criteria I had for physical activities that I wanted to do was they couldn't be directly competitive, where there is this, only one person win, one team wins, that kind of thing. Yeah, it does a weird mindset thing. There are dance competitions, but the experience of dancing is I'm just dancing with this person that I'm dancing with, and like there's not really an against like other people sort of mindset thing going on.
Did you do competitive sports before you got into dance?
Yeah, I did a bunch of things when I was younger. I uh, did karate, basketball, soccer, golf, uh, swimming, um, water polo. I didn't compete in all of them, but most of them.
That's a lot of sports. Did you feel like back then when you were doing them, did you feel this conflict with the fact that they were competitive, or was that something that just came later?
It came later, I would say. I didn't like sparring in karate, though. That was one of the things I did later, and it was. I mean, I had a love-hate relationship with it. Like, if I won, I was very happy, and if I lost, I was very sad. And I was like, I don't like this. And that one is like very, against someone else. Like they are right there. You are trying to hit them. It's so, ugh.
Hmm.
This is like the complete opposite.
I did karate as well, and I have the same experience. Like, I loved just doing katas, and I hated sparring. And it was just like, I just wanted to learn the movement and just learn how to do it with my body and practice it with myself. And I loved the whole. Um, I loved the discipline as well, and I loved the playfulness of it, just discovering my own boundaries. But then every time I had to fight someone, I just didn't like it, and I don't think I realized that I didn't like it. This was when I was really young. I think I stopped when I was maybe 13 or something. Um, but yeah, I didn't realize it that I didn't like it. But
Yeah, I
you
mean, at
just
that
brought that up
age,
for me. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I think there were many things I did that I didn't realize I didn't like until later. This is actually an insight that I had recently, and it's feeling alive for me, particularly these last few days. Like all the things I did in my life that I didn't know why I was doing them, and I was just doing them automatically and not really enjoying them. They weren't really bringing me much, but I just kept doing them and just kept persisting because I was trying to prove something to myself. Um, or sometimes not even, sometimes just doing it because that's what I did and just
do you have an
continuing.
example of anything you kept doing?
Yeah, I played classical violin for 15 years, and I I don't think I ever liked playing violin in the context that I was playing. Like, I didn't like doing so much just learning classical technique and studying every day and then having recitals and playing in an orchestra. Uh, and I even taught violin for a very short time until I realized I didn't like it, because actually that's what made me realize that I didn't like the kind of playing that I was doing. And very recently, I started just so I stopped playing the violin for many years. And recently, I came back to it because a lot of my friends are musicians, and we were just jamming together. And I decided to bring my violin, even though I started hating it after I quit. I was just like, never again, I'm not touching this instrument. And once I gave myself that space to just play freely and learn how to listen to other people and um, do things together, and I learned how to improvise as well, which I had done zero of in those 15 years. I didn't know how to improvise. It just became a completely different experience, and now I love it again. So I'm very happy that this relationship got healed. Do you have any experience like that with anything?
Hmm. I don't know if I've healed any of them yet. I think I
Mm,
tried to like pick before to some extent, like pick things I actually wanted. Um, and I basically just quit anything that I didn't like early enough. I think. Like I'm thinking of all the physical activities I did do, and um, I mostly quit within a year ish of
mm-hmm.
doing them, or I just like I was really young and I stopped, a few years after. But then I like chose dance very specifically. Um, music is an interesting case of I played tuba mostly in a
Oh wow.
band, high school band. So I did that for 5 years. And the way I engaged with that was very like I picked an instrument that they really needed a tuba player. So they kind of didn't have a choice. They couldn't like the teacher couldn't get too harsh on me because then I might like not sign up next year. So they always had to make sure I was happy, um, even if I wasn't exactly the best tuba player, to be honest. Um,
Interesting circumstances.
yeah, but then the last year that I played, I had to actually get good because I was the only like bass instrument that they had, and I was embarrassed for myself, so I actually just like spent a lot more time practicing that year. But I only practiced as much as I ever had to, pretty much, and that the prior years of them having to be nice to me sort of solidified that like, yeah, I'm just going to practice however much I actually want to. If I'm like not super great, at least it's kind of hard to tell.
Hmm.
Um, and in that time, I got to make a bunch of friends with music people. So your experience with classical violin reminds me of my friends who did ballet or synchronized swimming or whatnot. They they mentioned gaining a bunch of skills, but in this like context that um, they have been sometimes able to bring to dance in a more healthy way. And yeah, I don't think I haven't been doing anything for 15 years or whatever like that. So I haven't quite had that experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that was the only experience I've had of that length with anything that I can remember. Yeah. Well, I think maybe drawing, which actually was a similar path. Uh, did it for a long time, went to college, hated it, gained aversion to it, stopped, came back to it in a more playful way. Now I love it. So it seems to be a pattern that repeats for me. How are you feeling about time and the flow of the
Time.
conversation in general?
Been pretty chill about it all. Have been tracking it. Um, I was wondering, like there was you had some early questions on about how would I like to be perceived or like what are my goals for this podcast. Uh, I'm curious now, like what what are your goals in some sense? What would be a win for you in this podcast game? Or maybe like what do you want uh, people to know? How do you want to come across? Something in this realm.
Hmm. You mean from this conversation I'm having with you today?
Yeah.
How do I want to come across? I think I want to come across as someone who is having fun. And that's because I want to be having fun in this conversation. This was, yeah, I was trying to think about other things, but maybe there are other things, but I haven't yet managed to articulate them. Um, but this is uh, an intention I've set before, just to have fun during this conversation and not um, put pressure on myself to make it be a certain way. So um, I guess an answer to a different question that you didn't ask, which is how I think I might be coming across, um, is probably as someone who, well, obviously as someone who's never interviewed anyone before. I think that's clear. Um, I think it's hard for me sometimes in certain contexts, especially when it's something that I'm doing for the first time, to step into a leading role or hosting role. So I feel like I am very much leading and being led, and uh, it feels like a dance.
Dancing.
Yeah, exactly. um, and I don't know. I hope I'm being seen like that, like someone who's dancing and having fun.
Well, you could have been someone who, thought about it beforehand and had 50 questions and was just like,
I could have, yes. I somehow
that
had a
would have been a
feeling
different style.
that I had a feeling that this is not something you would be looking for so much. I didn't
How
ask
did you
you,
know that?
but well, when Malcolm asked me to do this, I don't remember exactly how he introduced the idea to me, but it was somehow clear that this was not the thing that either of you were looking for. Yeah, I don't even remember what he asked me, but somehow this was the idea I had in mind. Also, I don't know, I think I expect that if you're gonna be interviewed by a lot of people, uh, if everyone would come with 50 questions, well, they wouldn't necessarily have to be questions about specific things about yourself, like, oh, so tell me about your uh, dancing career. I don't think, they would have to be as repetitive, but I think it's nice to have some variety, not just in the content of the podcast, but also in the format of the interview. And it's nice to be a little bit loopy.
Hmm.
Yeah. Are there
That
some?
sounds something like goal achieved.
Yes, I think so too. Um, and I was coming back to the um, so since we're talking about me not coming with 50 different questions prepared and you not wanting to talk about specific topics, are there any topics that, like, that from your previous interview you felt like, oh, I could have actually talked about this and I didn't, and I would like to talk about it?
No, the last one was very topic heavy
Yeah.
in a certain way. That was the notable thing. That's why, in some sense, I say the thing about topics now. I mean, it's something that I have said before about topics. But no, I wanted to have more of the personal, like a bit more loopiness happening
Mm-hmm.
in the conversation. Actually, my very first thing that is not getting published is super loopy, and then the next one was more topic focused, and now we're calibrating,
Mm, cool. This is
figuring
a
out how to have some,
calibrating conversation.
both.
Do you feel like in general in your conversations, not just the podcasts, do you feel like there is a balance? Like, do you get all of those things, or do you tend more towards one of them?
I would say this depends on people's appetite for or ability to navigate loopiness. This is a very good question, actually. I like it. Um, Yeah, my experience with people is if they're not used to loopy conversations, they can get more self-conscious or um like their mind like doesn't quite process recursive meta type things very very well, or they're not used to it. It's certainly like a style of something, an aesthetic style of conversation that I have cultivated, and so like I also don't expect everyone I talk to uh, be able to do that. But I really like to. And then every now and then I meet someone who does it badly, is what I want to say. Like there's circlers who do it in a different way that from say rationalists, where rationalists are like, my model of your model of my model, blah 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 of you is da 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 da, and it's a little like very sus. Whereas circlers are just like, in relation to what you just said, I feel blah. It's like very straightforward, and that's still like a certain kind of meta. What was your question again? It was good. I feel like I got off track.
If you feel like there's a balance in your conversations that you have with people, usually between topic and topic based and more loopy, and a mix of those. Like, do you feel like that you tend more towards either one of those, or there's more of a balance? You started by mentioning that it
Yeah.
depends on the person you're talking to.
Yeah, it does. Like if I'm talking to a dance friends, I'm always pretty much the loopy one, the one who wants it to be loopier. If I'm talking to my loopy friends, then that's that becomes like, okay, but how do we ground this sort of conversation? Yeah, there is a balance, but it also depends again, on people's appetite. I think I actually answered it pretty well.
Yeah, I think you did. Sometimes I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm paying a lot of attention, and I feel like I still haven't mastered the skill of listening attentively and then having a question to ask about that, like immediately tapping into what I'm curious about. um, it takes me a moment to be like, huh, okay, processing, and then in the silence the curiosity surfaces, and I'm sometimes feeling a little bit self-conscious about that. Like it takes me a moment, and because I know that you also enjoy the slow pace, I'm even more self self-conscious, because we just kind of uh, add up together to the amount of silence and pauses. So I just wanted to mention that sometimes I'm noticing some discomfort, but I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with the discomfort.
It's a very cool reveal. Yeah, what's the experience of interviewing is the question that you seem to have already answered from that.
What is the experience of being interviewed by me so far?
I've been paying a lot of attention to this, like, how do I be playful and like flip things or like reveal something interesting. Yeah. I mean, part of my experience is, you revealing something that like that you just did is like, oh wow, that's cool, and it's you seem more comfortable with the pauses and the loopiness than I would have maybe otherwise expected from baseline something. Though in your initial message about what this podcast would be like, you said something like, can we just do like whatever we want? And that gave me a whole vibe of like, oh, this is probably going to be good. And I think you basically fulfilled on that one. So I had an expectation there, and it's been like, check. It's not clear to me that it's like your first time interviewing someone. Like I know this in some sense, but that's not like obvious the way you
Okay.
seem to think it is.
Okay.
Like sometimes I notice when I'm asking people questions, um, there's a different there's like I will like get a question when they're talking and then just remember it until they like end up saying, and I might change it when I end up asking it. I will also do a thing of like, okay, I'm trying to process everything you just said and then come up with a question because I don't have one yet. And sometimes it's like, okay, I know what my question. This actually happens the most. It's like I know what my question is. I just got to think about how to ask it because it's shaped like a curiosity. It's not shaped like a question yet. It's just like I noticed this thing, and I'm like, how, huh, huh, you know. And this relates to the thing I said earlier about like how I tend to think is not, it's not made of words. It's made of like and like tapping into feelings of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity and whatnot, and noticing the shape of what someone is saying.
I can relate to that. What you said about um, sometimes you're listening to someone and a question comes up and then you have to remember it until they finish saying what they said. And as you were saying that, I was noticing that I had a lot of both questions and just more abstract curiosities coming up. But then
Mm.
I don't think I have a lot of capacity to hold them and just okay, let's keep this here and then keep listening. So basically, I choose to just keep listening, and then I'm listening, and then other questions come up, and then it comes, to the end of what you're saying, and I either have a question about the thing that you just said, or I have nothing.
Ah.
So basically, I am very curious about many things. I just don't think I have developed this skill, which I guess maybe for people who interview other people more regularly, it's something that they end up developing the ability of being curious about something. And then maybe I could also just be writing it down, but I didn't think about that. I just want to be like fully here.
That's one, yeah, pretty straightforward thing that I have been doing.
Mm. You've been
I have a
taking
few
notes?
things written down.
Yeah.
Just a few things. It was like, okay, I want to remember this. I don't know when I'm going to ask this or like
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but it's like, okay,
Mm. I usually
that does it.
almost always take notes in conversations, especially if it's my first time talking to someone. But I think there's something about this being recorded that I'm like, if I'm taking notes, I feel like I'm kind of being caught off guard. And it just feels like I'm not being fully present. I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't feel right for me. Not that I'm like judging it ethically or anything, just like
Mm-hmm.
for me, it doesn't feel like the right way of being.
It can create a different quality of conversation. Like you might end up interacting more with your own thoughts than with the other person. Uh, how to mindfully take notes during a conversation is a whole thing. I mean, like I've said, I've written like 5 things down,
Hmm.
and they're just like a question that I had, a
You want to
curiosity,
tell
just
me
so I
about
can
those
remember.
5 things you wrote?
Yeah, well, so I mean, one of them was, "What's your experience of me now
Mm-hmm.
versus when you listen to the podcast?" I already asked that one. Um, and then there was the dropping the ball question. Um, there was the like, how would you like to be known, or like, what sort of image do you think you're putting out on the podcast? Um, then there's one I didn't ask, which I didn't find a good way to ask, but I can at least put it out there. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be answered right now, but
Yeah.
I can put it out there of like what something like, what did you know about me in general? Um, what's your impression of me from the podcast? Um, from Malcolm. What's your like, who is Eric? What's that image? Um, and then I have identity written, and I don't remember what that is.
Hmm. So are those in order of when you wrote them down? Like, did you
Uh,
write the first one
no,
first? No.
not quite.
So what made you want to tell them to me in that order?
Um, it's just which one felt easiest to like explain why
Okay.
I I wrote it down.
Did this question make you feel uncomfortable?
A little bit. It was a little strange. It was like, oh, why didn't I
Yeah,
do
I
that?
could see it in your
I
face.
should have just gone from like, the first question to the last one. Why didn't I just do that? That would have been better for some reason.
Oh, it's okay. I like the order you chose. It was a good order. It was a good.
It was the correct order.
It was the correct order. You won the game.
Well, I hope it was the correct order because, otherwise we would have to throw out the universe and get a new one because
Yeah.
here we are.
Luckily, it was. I'm noticing that I'm feeling more playful after this last, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and I'm trying to figure out what's happened there. Hmm. Yeah, I'm feeling like a different kind of energy, different kind of vibe, playfulness, amusement, more relaxed. I think I noticed it for the first time. It feels a bit vulnerable to share this. I'm gonna tell you.
Well, here we are.
I think I noticed it for the first time. I feel like a shy little girl. I noticed it when you told me, I don't even remember what was the question I asked you, but it told me that you liked my question. I was like, ah, that's nice. And it was about me asking you about what's your experience of being interviewed by me so far. And then there was some other question, and you said that, and then you said some other things like appreciating something that I had said, and I was like, oh, it's so nice to be appreciated. And I noticed like a lot of parts of me were like relaxing. um oh, and you said also that you don't think it doesn't seem like it for you, that it's the first time that I'm interviewing someone. Well, basically you were reflecting on what's your experience of being interviewed by me,
Mhm.
and it was mostly nice things. So I was like, ah, that's so nice. I think that's when it started. and and now more recently, yeah, I think that made me feel more confident to just play more. And I think this is what was happening now, me asking you. Like, I don't think before, like at the beginning of our call, I would have asked you, oh, so what are those 5 things you wrote? And now I did. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's probably just like feeling seen and appreciated made me feel more comfortable, um, and therefore being comfortable to be more playful. Did you pick up on any of this, or what is your like? Did your experience change in any way, like since then, or at some point in the
Mm.
call?
So now you're getting to the juicy questions. I mean, you were before, but I'm like, no, now I'm paying attention to the like, I don't know, there's something in the question.
Do you like it? Do you like
It
the way
seems
it's
like a
going?
question. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It seems like a question you might not have asked before.
Yeah.
It seems like in the same vein as the like 5 things. What are the 5 things? Um, no, it was subtle. I probably like would not have commented on it directly. Um, yeah, it was subtle. It was kind of, I wasn't paying attention to it until you were like, "Oh, now I feel more playful." Like I did have a sense that the conversation gets a little bit more playful.
Hmm.
Hmm. I'm wondering if it's accurate that it's like something in you relaxed when I said what I did, and then you were like, oh, okay, I can. Or did it feel different than that?
Different than relaxation. I think there was relaxation for sure. Maybe there was more than that too. Um, maybe safer and therefore braver to
Mm-hmm.
take risks. Yeah, I think so. Maybe like also this kind of like flirty side of me also like,
Ah,
yeah, just came out, just like, oh, let's really play with this person, just like really feeling like playing with you. Yeah.
well, I also wanted to comment that the question of, did I notice a difference is a particularly like, it feels like a question I would ask.
Hmm.
It has this like interesting sort of loopy quality. It's um, about something that happened that like was recent, but like I definitely had an experience or like not of the last, 5-10 minutes that I can then reflect on and be like, oh, hmm, that's a good sort of loopy question.
What do you mean definitely not in the last 10 minutes?
No, like I definitely had an experience of the last 10 minutes and I can like then reflect on that and then I will
Ah,
definitely have an answer of some kind
okay.
to that. Now here I am like telling you how good your questions are.
That's what my purpose was all along. I'm joking.
I found a button. I can just
No, stop
a lever.
complimenting me.
Well, now you might be wondering, is it like a fake compliment? Is he just gonna
Yeah,
like say that whenever now?
that's why I'm telling you to
Can
stop.
you trust me?
I've actually been thinking a lot about compliments in general. My friend Yatart, I don't know if you know him, he's on Twitter.
I
Yeah,
know
he's
of.
great at giving compliments. And I feel so inspired by him. Like and it seems like they come really naturally to him. I think it's a skill that he has trained, but like, I don't know, I haven't talked to him about this specifically yet, but like, I don't know if it's something that he has practiced so much that he became really good at it, or if it's something that he's just naturally good at it and therefore he enjoys doing it and does it more. Maybe it's a bit of both. But I've been noticing how his compliments really energize me because they feel so true, and they are also so
Hmm.
timely. And I think also this is probably why I noticed this change. Like, I could pinpoint where this change came from when you said those things about your experience of being interviewed by me. Um, so I don't know. Do you have a similar relationship with compliments? What is the role that compliments play in your life? Do you compliment people intentionally, or do you like receiving compliments? Because there are some people who don't like receiving compliments. So I'm curious about how that is for you.
The thing you said about timely, or I'm not sure if you said accurate or something, um, feels relevant. My relationship to compliments is something about like how true and relevant are they,
Mm.
or something. And like first of all, I can usually take in. I'm trying to figure out like, is this actually their experience? Are they just doing a nice thing? Is this like what I want to be doing or like known to be good at or something like that? Um, compliments are a form of feedback in a certain way. Uh, and then so whenever you have feedback like that, you have to always like be like, okay, where's it coming from? what is this person's model of the world, and like what are their experiences such that this seems notable enough to comment on, if that's what's happening, as opposed to them running a compliment script or something. So I think a lot of the compliments that actually feel good are ones where it's like I had some effort put into this thing. This is like something I want to be known for or like be good at, and like someone is seeing it, and that's really nice. It can also be like sort of a blind spot sort of compliment. Like I didn't think anyone would notice this thing that I like didn't even notice myself I was necessarily trying to do, or like didn't think too much about it, and then suddenly it's in my awareness. It's like, oh, I'm just okay. What do I do with that? Oh. And that can definitely feel uncomfortable at times. I think I've been able to. I have definitely been uncomfortable with compliments about things like that, or like people thanking me in a way that was like really awkward before. And now I think I still get uncomfortable, but I'm like, oh, that was unexpected. Wow. And it's sort of like I'm able to
Is that
hold
actually
out.
what you say when someone compliments you?
Depends on who's complimenting me. As I said, what's their situation. Like I might just say that, yeah, depending on who it is. But I might also ask like some just like clarifying things about like, when did I whatever blah blah blah. When did you notice da 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 da? How did it come across? Like there's just like wanting to understand their experience more. And it's usually, I mean, I guess sometimes this makes them uncomfortable because I'm like asking about their experience. It's like, sort of intimate questions sometimes. This is where we get into the loopy stuff.
So it seems like it's important for you the where you feel like the compliment is coming from and why the person is choosing to say it, and it's also important like you like taking it's more comfortable for you to receive compliments now than it was in the past, and it also makes you curious about um, what's the experience of the person giving the compliment. I find that really interesting, and I think I can relate to that. Like someone gives me a compliment and I'm like, where is that where is that coming from? In what ways do you find me that thing? And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes I also feel uncomfortable asking because it's like, oh, the person is just gonna think I'm fishing for more compliments or like more detail about why I am awesome. But I can
Yeah, that
relate
could
to
be a
that
different kind of.
curiosity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, another kind of compliment doesn't even. It's not even like you are good at blah 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 blah. It's just someone relaying their actual experience to you, and
Mm-hmm.
then like it feels good that their experience of you is like this, has some kind of quality to it that you like strive to have.
Mm.
It can be another form of compliment.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also just choosing to notice things that might be pleasant for the other person to hear, but just like they are as true as other things that might be more unpleasant. You just choose to, oh, I'm gonna mention this thing now to bring it to the other person's awareness. Um, and I think this is also what you did when I asked you about how it was to be interviewed by me. You just told things that were your experience then, and maybe you could have chosen other things that were not so nice, but you chose to say those ones.
Ah, so that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like,
Okay.
what am I choosing to say?
Hmm.
How did I choose to say it? Like, what did I not say
Hmm.
about my experience? Um, I mean, I can. There's this whole question of like, whether you believe me or not. But I was basically just being like, what is my experience? It's just this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, in some sense, very authentic or truthful. That's like
Mm-hmm.
generally when someone asks me my experience. I mean, I guess I have a slight filter on the whole thing of like, there's definitely different ways to say the same thing. That can be like, more like you can say a yes and or a yes but, and like just
Mm-hmm.
sort of say the exact same thing, and it's it's a whole frame thing. Yeah. I had a good example of like the compliment thing though. It's like a lot of people will often compliment my dancing, and this is a very like concrete area because uh usually I can see how good they are at dancing, and like this tells me that there's sort of like how much weight do I have on this person's opinion sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
for how good I am at dancing. I thought it would be helpful to have a concrete experience, so I wanted to like
Mm-hmm.
interject that as opposed to just like blah 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 abstract whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit it feels like it might have been slightly awkward to just be like example, even
Mm.
though the topic moved on a little bit. Here we are.
So you're talking about compliments from other dancers specifically.
From other dancer, or even just other, I mean anybody, but like when some random people compliment my dancing, I'm like, this gives me information that they like it, they appreciate it, but they don't necessarily know what they're looking at unless I have more information about like
Mm.
what kind of dance they do or what do they know about dance. When dancers do it, I assume a certain level of knowledge and stuff. Then like depending on how good they are, I'll be like, weight that more or less or
Mm.
something.
Yeah, and I guess this is there's another way to complement dancing, which would be more like what you mentioned before, like the person relating their experience to watching you dance. Like, oh, your dance just reminded me of this time when I was a child, and it actually made me cry. And when I saw you this specific movement and the way how you interacted with your dance partner, I actually felt my body releasing tension in the hips or something. And I just wanted to tell you that I really loved that moment, and it was beautiful. And I appreciate that you're dancing and what you're doing for the world. I guess that would be a different kind of
That's
compliment.
not normally the one I get. That would tell me a lot about this person being more like somatically aware
Okay.
of themselves and like in touch emotionally, and that would be like, oh, this is a very interesting person. That's what that would say to me.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be that specific. I maybe went a little bit far, but
It
just
was too
more,
good.
yeah, not realistic enough. Uh, but yeah, even if someone would tell you instead of like, I like your dancing, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to get with this. Just like, maybe I just wanted to tell me, like, yes, Silvia, there are different ways of giving compliments that would feel more valid for me regarding my dancing. But anyway, just like imagining someone telling you, oh, your dancing made me feel really warm in my heart. I guess that would be different than I like how we dance or you're a good dancer.
Yeah. There's like, where is the center of attention almost? Is it
Yeah.
like I am good, or it is, this person feels this thing in
Mm,
relation to me? Definitely the second one is one I prefer, and it feels like it's coming from somewhere alive as opposed to just sort
mm,
of like blank authority status stamp
mm,
thing of
mm,
where it's like, okay, but who's this person, saying this thing? I don't have to ask as much, who is this person saying this thing? Um, I just get to experience this person saying this thing if they're like, I felt this when I saw you dancing.
mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really like the um, how you put it. It's coming from something that is alive in that moment, and that makes the whole difference.
Hmm. So as we are coming to end time here,
Yes.
as we're wrapping up, um, do you have any final ish reflections, things to say about your experience, things you haven't said, something?
Mm. So, uh, what's coming up for me now is this like this thing I mentioned before, like there's a certain line that's been always constant, which is my awareness of our roles and me interviewing you and uh, you being interviewed. And there's this part of me that is like, ha, he mentioned that we're coming to an end. That should have been me. Does that mean that I'm an incompetent interviewer? And I was aware of the time, but I was just like, do I say it? Do I not? So there's this. Um, at the same time, I'm feeling very comfortable, feeling connected to you. Yeah, I just feel like having a checkout more than saying anything. Is that okay with you?
just like, okay, that's it.
No, just
Is
like
that what you
having a
mean?
checkout in terms of like where I am right now and where you are right now.
Yeah. Okay, I just like checkout is an unfamiliar term,
Ah, okay.
but
Yeah,
I
like there's a
understand it now.
check-in
Okay.
and a checkout. That's
Yeah.
what I mean by that. Um, mm, feeling in a very different space than where I was at the beginning of this call. I feel like something shifted for me, also in the way how I see you, um, and in our connection. I feel like I feel like I really connected with you, and I feel close to you. Mm. Still feeling, still feeling that playful energy. Mm. Noticing that I could easily keep talking to you for longer if I didn't have to go now.
Mhm.
Um, I'm very curious to see what the next episodes of this podcast are going to look like. I'm definitely going to watch them. Um, I'm grateful for your for for what you did in this call and how you played with me and for for throwing the ball at you and then getting it back and how that has changed. Um, feeling grateful for having met you. Yeah, those are some things. What about you?
Well, now I'm feeling complimented. I'm like, oh, that was did a lot of. She feels very grateful. Wow. Okay. Hmm. My experience of the beginning of the whole thing was something more like a shot in the dark, and like I don't know who this person is that well. We'll see what happens. Uh, seems to have turned out pretty good. I'm happy about that. Um, this whole thing about you revealing the bit about when I was like good question and that like relaxed a bit about you. Um, definitely, I was like, oh, that seems like that was a really valuable reflection, and that it was like, oh, I could probably like do that somewhat more intentionally. That's like I definitely know this like move that's available to do there. Uh, that I didn't do as early as I could have, or as it made sense to. I don't know. There's like definitely something there that I can do more of. Um, in general, I've valued your reflections a lot. They were very, I don't know, they seemed authentic, they seemed real, they seemed like on the like kind of meta and loopiness that I do like. Um, yeah, it was like competently navigated, so to speak. I feel like we definitely have danced in this conversation. Um, it was, yeah, this is closer to what I was imagining with the style of podcast. And it makes me very happy that you like want to listen to the future episodes as well.
Well, it was a pleasure to dance with you. Thank you for having me here, and I guess I'll see you around.